Welcome back. So the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa says the deployment of South African troops to the DRC is rooted in imperialist agendas driven by corporate and mining interests rather than genuine humanitarian concerns. Giwusa President Mametlwe Sebei joins us now for more. And I think I should mention this as well before we actually get into this discussion with Mr. Sebei, that we were expecting that at 9 o'clock, that discussion on the way forward for GNU leaders was set to take place, a meeting between the leader of the Democratic Alliance as well as the President Cyril Ramaphosa at 9 o'clock. Well, we're hearing now that that meeting was postponed due to an urgent SADC Troika meeting over the DRC crisis that the President then needs to attend to. So that matter seeming to be more urgent for the President. And so Giwusa also speaking out about what we've seen take place in the DRC. Mametlwe, a good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Nice to be here, Nani.
Yeah, I mean, you want to start off, of course, by talking about just the news that it was 9 soldiers that we had lost, and then the news that yesterday 3 were killed in a crossfire, 1 succumbing to their injuries, and so South Africa having lost 13 troops in the DRC.
Absolutely. I mean, we are shocked, we are appalled. Our condolences and sympathy and thoughts are with the family, the bereaving family of the fallen soldiers. Ultimately, we know who is the guilty party. And this is this government that is using an ordinary black working class soldiers in particular to fight a war for the profits, for the imperialist interest and the plunder of the DRC by the big corporations, particularly in the mining industry, at the behest and in the interest of which they are pursuing policies of government in this country, but also internationally, including in DRC itself.
I mean, that's a big thing to say when there's a clear understanding by many that our troops are there to help defend the humanitarian situation. So perhaps you need to give me a little bit more motivation behind the argument that you've put forward, where we've seen other nations send troops as well to the DRC to ward off what is understood to be Rwandan M23 rebels from vulnerable communities.
Well, you know, as Marxists, I mean, Lenin's actually aptly put it, that a war is a continuation of a policy by other means. And in order to understand the character of the intervention, we've got to analyze what class interest drives, decide, and of course, define the objectives of the policy the policy objectives of the dominant ruling interest in society. In this case, you have a government here that domestically in every matter, particularly on questions of conflict between the interests of the working class and of course the big corporations that have monopolized the private ownership of the economy, of the minerals, of the land in this country, it has clarified where its loyalty lies. And to expect that this government that has carried a brutal and a bloody massacre of the workers at Marikana, but also is engaged in a policy of a brutal class war against every movement and a struggle of the working class for better wages, for proper, free, adequate services, and for the distribution of wealth and land in the interest of the vast disenfranchised majority of the black masses in this country, that it has chosen the side of this big cooperation, that suddenly in DRC, it would represent any other interest, is delusional. The reality is deployment of security in DRC, of the security forces in DRC, is to have the South African army acting as a private security of the mining corporations that are plundering the wealth of South Africa. These are the South African, multinational, but also foreign-owned multinational corporations that are plundering that country and looting it on industrial scale. DRC is arguably the richest, the mineral richest country in the whole world. It has an estimated mineral riches of 445 trillion rands worth of minerals. And just reflect on that. If if that wealth was to be used in the service and in the interest of the Congolese people, they are to take ownership of it, they are to beneficiate it. You could not only abolish poverty, but also secure peace and comfort for the Congolese people. More than that, you can elevate their standards of living to levels currently unimaginable and not have all the Congolese people emigrating everywhere, and in this country in particular, being treated in a horrendous manner by this government that is one xenophobic. That to imagine that this very government that is completely xenophobic and treat the Congolese immigrants in this country in the manner that they are, that suddenly they are willing to sacrifice soldiers, in defense and for the prosperity and the peace of the people, in the DRC. It's delusional. You just have to look at their policy. In respect of the Congolese immigrants in the country, in respect of the black working class in this country, and you look at that and say, whose interest is this government serving? Because let's say it, right? The South African Defence Force is only but an external mission of the whole military apparatus of the state that domestically is represented by the SAPS, South African Police Service. This is a police service that is killing the miners, that is brutalizing the working class every time they rise in defense and to advance their interests. And therefore, you have to look at that, because the foreign policy of any government, and this includes this government, is but an application and continuation at an international level of the domestic policy of this government. And that's the reason we say the working class just have to rely on their own experience of the state in this country to understand what is the role of the military and the role of the South African intervention in the DRC itself.
I want to hear about what you talk about other countries. I mean, in the statement that you've put together, you write, many South Africans caught in the imperialist euphoria of this government have lamented the role of Paul Kagame, whose funding and equipment of the M23 are responsible for the fighting capacity of its forces. Finish that thought for me.
Well, I mean, Paul Kagame, Yoweri Museveni, and the gangs around him who have been looting, DRC with the brazenness, with crudely, are rightfully condemned by the people in this country. But to suggest simply on the strength of the fact that the dominant faction, in the DRC is able to vouch for the honest and the sincerity of the South African government, I mean, is to miss a point. This does not exonerate them from the imperialist aims in anything. If anything, it actually means they are worse in their complicity, because this is a state that is propping up a very corrupt, dynastic, authoritarian regimes, previously of Kabila, now of Tshisekedi, I think, who is himself, like Kabila before him, a son of the previous ruler, is himself, a son of a former Mobutu-era prime minister, who is as corrupt and as authoritarian and as democratic as they get. So it is not by mistake that even the Congolese army itself is disintegrating around them in the face of this onslaught. Because for many of those soldiers, the propaganda that is being fed to South Africans, that they are there to defend democracy, that they are there to defend, in governance, stability, and all of that, that would be laughable if only it wasn't tragic, because their experience of the corruption of that regime, of the tribalism, that has meant they are actually giving the false pretenses that the likes of Kagame and Yoweri Museveni need to intervene in the eastern, Congo, apparently in defense of the Banyamalange people that they don't care about, is making those soldiers to refuse to die for this regime, because they know that all of this propaganda that people in this country seem to be, childishly taken seriously, is nothing but a deception and lies. So the fact of the matter is, we need the wealth of Congo for the Congolese people. And we need the Congolese working class to rise. And if this government, by the way, was really fighting for the people of Congo to claim their wealth, it will not be running short of the forces and the people of Congo who are willing to fight and die for their land, for their minerals, for their families, for their communities. Yeah. The reality is that they cannot even trust the people of Congo with that fight, exactly because they're not there for them.
I want to hear this, because then I want to hear what I suppose the recommendation then is to deal with the crisis, because what you do have is hundreds and thousands of people fearing for their lives. In Goma, for instance, fleeing their homes, trying to find safety. Yesterday, I was talking about how, human rights bodies are concerned. I think it was Amnesty International, if I'm not wrong, concerned that 1.5 million children's lives could be at risk in Goma. Very concerning. What then is the suggestion from Giwusa, for instance, on what the people of Congo should do with all the issues that you've raised this evening?
Congo, the working class people of Congo need to rise up, and they need to be absolutely supported in that effort, not to show up the very elite that by facilitating the plunder and the looting of Congo, by dividing its working class along tribal lines, have actually imposed on these masses, on the masses of the Congolese people, this horrific wars that has devastated so many lives, so many communities, and left millions of people displaced, right? We don't need any of that. What we do need is to make sure that we support an independent working class organizations, the trade union movement, the community civics, and in fact, equip and arm them to rise up in defense of their families and their communities against the invasion by the forces of reaction that have been sponsored by Kagame and Yoweri Museveni, but the same as well by those forces that want to be plundering their resources, including, by the way, including South African listed multinational corporations that are playing a horrific role in the DRC, as they are doing here in Limpopo, in Northwest, and everywhere, right? And for that, the workers' movement in this country must take a position that they would be demanding the withdrawal of South African troops, but also providing a necessary support to rebuild the workers' movement in that country, to support the communities, including self-organization of community and working class militia that can be able to assemble themselves in the people's army that can rise not only against imperialist forces, but that elite that is responsible for actually creating the conditions of this devastating civil war that has been going on for decades, without any corruption, the oppression, and the ruthless exploitation of the people of Congo in the pursuit of the brutal colonial extraction of their minerals. You are not going to end the war in Congo, but also you are simply going to be sacrificing South African and soldiers from all over the continent and wherever that they are drawn from, in a war that is about the profits, the interest, and the plunder for the enrichment of the elite and the big corporations that are, of course, looting Congo of its minerals and depriving its people of peace, comfort, and, of course, the prosperity that they deserve.
Yeah, this is an ongoing discussion, and you've said a mouthful, but thank you so much for speaking to us and putting certainly the position of Giwusa forward. Mametlwe Sebei, the president of Giwusa, responding to some of the images and certainly the crisis that we see unfolding in the Democratic Republic of Congo.